There's a three-way tie right now for first place between Northern Arizona, Southern Utah, and Weber State. The Wildcats control their own destiny. If they win this weekend, they get a piece of the Big Sky Conference co-championship. NAU and Southern Utah will battle it out this weekend for the other spot, which might be the entire conference title. Other winners include Eastern Washington, Montana, and Sacramento State. Your players of the week are Southern Utah's Patrick Tyler, plus both Jack Sendelbach and Jordan Descalo of Eastern Washington. On offense, Patrick Tyler threw for 370 yards and 3 touchdowns in Southern Utah's win over UC Davis. He completed 26 passes to 9 different receivers for their 6th consecutive win of the season. That's why they're in the hunt for the Big Sky Championship. On defense, Eastern's linebacker Jack Sendelbach finished with 11 tackles, half a sack, and a fumble recovery in the Eagles' win over North Dakota. And his teammate, Special Teams Player of the Week kicker Jordan Descalo, was a major factor in the same game. He punted 7 times, averaging 52.7 yards per kick, landing twice inside the 20-yard line. There's 2 games this week which are Game of the Week. The first is Montana at Montana State, also known as the Brawl of the Wild. The other is Portland State visiting Eastern Washington. Montana at Montana State is going to be good, especially considering how the Bobcats played against NAU. It was a 1-point game. Expect this one to be tight as well. While Eastern played without Gage Goodward and still had 2 Eagles make Player of the Week. It's shocking that they're not in the hunt. You can catch Cal Poly at Northern Colorado. Idaho State goes to Weber State, and Weber needs this win for the co-championship. UC Davis travels in-state to Sac State. And my game of the week is Southern Utah hosting Northern Arizona, or as I'm calling it, the fight for first place. Look for Case Cookis to pass the 3K mark this week. For more on Big Sky, check out Big Sky Conf, that's CONF.com. For the FCS Conference Whiparound, I'm Anthony Crescenzo.
Welcome to Week 12, a unique week in the Big South, as 3 matchups this week feature a game between a pair of 4-0 teams, a pair of 2-2 teams, and a pair of 0-4 teams. Before we get into this week's action, let's check out how each team did in Week 11. Liberty won their 6th game of the year, defeating Presbyterian at home 47-28. The Flames took a commanding 17-zip lead after just the first 7 minutes and never looked back. The win ensures Liberty of their 12th consecutive season, finishing with a winning record. The big day came from Flames quarterback Stephen Calvert, who earned his 3rd Conference Offensive Player of the Week award. He completed 14 of his 26 passes for 311 yards and 3 scores. 2 of the scores went to Cephas Reddick, who caught 4 passes for 125 yards. On the ground, Carrington Mosley rushed for 149 yards and a score on 27 carries. For the Blue Hose, quarterback Will Brock completed 16 of his 33 passes for 297 yards and 2 scores. Monmouth won their 7th straight game with a 41-14 victory over Gardner-Webb to run their record to 9-1. Flip that around, and that's the running Bulldogs record, 1-9. The Hawks led 27-zip before the Bulldogs found the end zone. The big day offensively came from Hawks QB Kenji Bahar, who completed 15 of his 24 passes for 175 yards and 4 scores. 2 touchdowns went to Reggie White Jr., while Joey Aldarelli and Jake Powell each caught 1. And for the Bulldogs, preseason player of the year, Tyrell Maxwell, was held in check. He completed just 9 passes for 105 yards and 2 scores and had just 28 yards on the ground. In what should have been the Big South game of the week, number 23 Kennesaw State shut out Charleston Southern 38-0. The win was the Owls' 9th straight after dropping their opener at Samford. It is their 2nd shutout of the year, and in their last 3 conference games, they've allowed just 3 points. All 5 touchdowns for the Owls came on the ground. 3 were from Darnell Holland, who rushed for 109 yards on 16 carries. On the defensive side, it was a big day for the Owls linebackers. Redshirt junior Anthony Gore Jr. had a team-high 8 tackles, 7 solo, and 2 sacks, earning Big South Defensive Player of the Week honors. Redshirt freshman Bryson Armstrong had 4 stops, 3 solo, 2 sacks, a forced fumble to earn his second Big South Rookie of the Week award. Now, let's check out the updated conference standings as we head into the final week of the season. Number 22, Kennesaw State and Monmouth are at the top. Both are 4-0 in the conference play and 9-1 overall, with a big showdown coming this weekend. In the middle, it's Charleston Southern and Liberty at 2-2, and at the bottom, Presbyterian and Gardner-Webb are both winless at 0-4. Gardner-Webb and Presbyterian meet this week in a battle of winless Big South teams. This is the 40th meeting between the two schools, with the Bulldogs leading the series 21-18. Gardner-Webb comes into this meeting losers of 5 in a row, while the Blue Hose have lost 4 straight. Both teams come in with more total rushing yards than passing yards, so look for this one to be played primarily on the ground. 2 of the league's 5 leading rushers will be on display in this game, Torrance Marble for the Blue Hose and Tyrell Maxwell for the Runnin' Bulldogs. Both should get the majority of touches for their respective teams if they want to win and avoid a winless conference season. Liberty and Charleston Southern will meet this week in a battle of 2-2 Big South teams. This is the 25th meeting between the two schools, with the Flames leading the all-time series 19-5. However, the Bucks have won the last 3 times. The Flames' offense has been hot, gaining over 400 yards in 4 straight games, averaging 509 in that span. Charleston Southern's offense was non-existent in their loss last week at Kennesaw, as they were shut out for the 3rd time this year. The Bucks come in with the FCS's 25th ranked defense, but they're in for a tough one against the country's 9th best offense, which is led by quarterback Stephen Calvert, who ranks 6th in the FCS in passing yards and 4th in passing touchdowns. The Flames aren't just one-dimensional, as running back Carrington Mosley has found his stride recently, going for over 120 yards in 3 straight games. Finally, in the game of the year in the Big South, we have 9-1 Monmouth on the road to face 9-1 Kennesaw State. Both teams are 4-0 in conference play, and Kennesaw moved up from 23 to 22 in the most recent Stats FCS Top 25 poll. Monmouth is still on the outside of the top 25 looking in, despite having fewer losses than 16 of the teams ahead of them. The winner of this battle will be crowned the Big South champion and will receive an automatic bid into the FCS playoffs, although, according to Stats FCS bracketology, both teams should get in. The winner also will finish with double-digit wins and be undefeated in conference play. It is no surprise Kennesaw State is in this position to win the conference, as they were picked to win at least a share of the conference in the preseason, but Monmouth was picked to finish 4th. This is the 3rd meeting between the two schools, with the Owls winning the previous 2. The key matchup is between Hawks quarterback Kenji Bahar and the Owls defense. Bahar has thrown a touchdown pass in 8 straight games, including 14 of that span. He's coming off a 4 TD performance from a week ago. Bahar has also thrown just 7 interceptions this season, and he will need to protect the ball against the pick-hungry Owls secondary. They have intercepted a pass in every game this year and lead the nation with 19 total. Their plus 18 turnover margin is currently the 3rd best single-season total in Big South history. This is just the 2nd winner-take-all game in conference history, and the league will get a new champ this year, as neither team has won the conference. That's all for this week in the Big South. For the FCS Conference Whiparound, I'm Frank LaSalle.
In another great week in the Colonial Athletic Association, the top teams took a huge step forward as we creep closer to the playoffs. Taking a look at the standings, the James Madison Dukes sit alone at 7-0. Elon and Stony Brook are tied at 6-1. Delaware and New Hampshire are both 5-2. Richmond and Maine are behind them at 3-4. Towson, Villanova, and Rhode Island are all 2-5. Albany has 1 win, and William & Mary is winless. Maine came up short in a great effort against FBS foe UMass, losing 44-31 at Fenway Park. Josh Mack dominated on the ground with 110 yards and 2 touchdowns. Stony Brook dominated in the second half to beat Wagner 38-14. The Seawolves got great efforts out of Jordan Gowans and Shane Lawless. Gowans ran for 115 yards and 2 scores, and Lawless had 7 tackles, an interception, and a fumble recovery. Towson was able to hold off William & Mary by a score of 26-14. Tiger freshman Kobe Tippett had 14 tackles and returned a punt for 62 yards and a score. Delaware dominated Albany 22-3. The defense dominated, holding the Great Danes to 120 yards and forced 4 turnovers. Albany got a great defensive performance out of Nate Hatalski who recorded 19 tackles, doing his best to keep his team in the game. In one of the biggest upsets of the season in conference, Rhode Island beat Villanova 20-6. The Rams got great performances out of quarterback Jawan Lawson, who threw for a career-high 336 yards while throwing and running for a touchdown. In our only top 25 matchup within the conference, the Phoenix had the winning streak snapped by New Hampshire, losing 16-6. Elon got a strong effort out of their defense, led by linebacker Warren Messer, who had 12 tackles, 2.5 for a loss. The Wildcats' defense was even better. That was led by Jared Kuhl, who had 6 tackles, 2 for a loss, a sack, and a fumble. James Madison clinched at least a share of the conference title for the 3rd straight season after holding off Richmond 20-13 in a thriller. On the final drive, Trey Sharp rushed for 54 yards and the game-winning touchdown. Richmond got a stellar performance out of Tyler Wilkins, who caught 12 passes for 180 yards and a score. For the final week of the season, we have some stellar matchups. William & Mary travels to Richmond looking for their first conference win. Rhode Island heads to Towson looking for back-to-back wins. Villanova will look to bounce back hosting Delaware. New Hampshire will look to finish strong against Albany, and Stony Brook will look to beat Maine to stay in contention for a possible share of the CAA title. Now in the biggest game in the conference, James Madison heads to Elon to take on the Phoenix. 2 of the top offenses in the conference will battle it out for the conference title. If the Dukes win, they win the conference outright. If Elon wins, we could have a potential 3-way tie for the title. What a scenario. With your FCS Whiparound, I'm Ryan Griffith. Good luck to the CAA this weekend.
The Ivy League once again didn't disappoint as it produced another bombshell of a week. Let's get right into the action. First off, we saw Dartmouth take on Brown at Fenway Park. Brown is in last place and still has yet to get a conference win, and it looks like their search will continue. Dartmouth finally wins a game by over more than 3 points, led by quarterback Jack Hennigan and receiver Hunter Hagdorn, who linked up for 2 touchdowns. The Big Green easily took this one 33-10. Next up, we saw Harvard welcome in Penn to Cambridge. Penn has been rolling these past few weeks, and they kept it going on Saturday. Their defense was dominating, holding Harvard to only 2 field goals the whole game. Led by running back Trey Solomon, who rushed for 181 yards and a touchdown on only 15 carries, Penn took this game 23-6 on the road. After that, we saw Columbia travel upstate to take on the Big Red of Cornell. This was a low-scoring affair, as only 2 touchdowns scored in this game came in the last 4 minutes. But Columbia's defense proved to be the better of the 2 units, forcing Cornell into a safety in the 3rd quarter as Columbia took this game 18-8. Finally, first place Yale took a field in Jersey to take on the Princeton Tigers, and with a win, Yale would clinch the Ivy League title. The start of this game was all Princeton as they jumped out to a 24-7 lead with under 2 minutes left to play in the half. But Yale, in a season of upsets and parity in the Ivy League, began their comeback. They scored 3 consecutive touchdowns to give themselves a 28-24 lead after the 3rd quarter. After Princeton responded with a touchdown of their own, but Yale wasn't done as in the 4th quarter, freshman running back Zane Dedek punched the ball in from the 4-yard line, giving Yale the final lead of the day, behind quarterback Kurt Rawlings, who was 26 of 34 for 304 yards and 2 touchdowns. Yale was able to pull this game out 35-31 and clinch the Ivy League title. After all that action, let's take a look at the conference standings. Like we just mentioned, with Yale's win, they'd lock up the Ivy League title and sit unrivaled in first place. Behind them sits Columbia and Dartmouth, both 4-2 in conference play and 7-2 overall. Penn, Cornell, and Harvard sit behind them, all tied at 3-3 in the conference. Finally, Princeton and Brown round out the conference, with the Tigers sitting at 2-4 and the Bears at 0-6. Now we'll take a quick look at next week's games in the Ivy League. Ivy League title holder Yale gets to finish off their season at home against the Harvard Crimson. Columbia gets to stay home and finish their season off against the last place Brown Bears. Dartmouth also plays at home as well as they get Princeton to finish off their year. And finally, Penn takes on Cornell at home in a matchup of 2 3-3 teams in the final week of the Ivy League season. That's it for this week in the Ivy League football. For Football Game Plan's FCS Whiparound, I'm Ian Gridley, and I'll see you next week.
What a Week 11 in the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference. Larry Brim Jr. throws a 48-yard touchdown pass to Takavon Mitchell as time expires to give Bethune-Cookman a 13-10 road victory over North Carolina Central. The Wildcats are now tied with the Eagles, the team that they just beat, for 3rd in the conference. Lamar Raynard passes for 252 yards and 2 TDs, and Markel Cartwright runs for 127 and 2 scores, as well as North Carolina A&T tops Savannah State to stay unbeaten. Devon Gibbons had 217 yards total for the Tigers, but it was not enough. The Aggies clinched a share of the MEAC title, which is their third in the past 4 seasons and 9th overall. They are also only one of 2 teams that remain undefeated in the FCS. Kalen Newton scored with only 5 seconds remaining to cap off a 4th quarter rally, giving the Howard Bison their 5th straight win, topping Norfolk State 28-24. Anthony Filiaw rushes for 193 on 20 carries to help the Bison keep surging. South Carolina State dominates early, scoring 26 unanswered points before halftime as they cruise to a 33-15 win over the Hampton Pirates. LeBron Morris runs for 134 and 2 TDs for the Bulldogs, who earned their 3rd win of the season. Let's take a look at the standings. Unbeaten 8th-ranked North Carolina A&T stays at the top. The Howard Bison, coming on strong with 5 straight wins, are second with a 6-1 conference record. Bethune-Cookman, North Carolina Central, and Hampton are all in the middle with a winning conference record. Norfolk State is behind that group with 3 wins in the conference. Week 12 is shaping up to be another entertaining week. Let's start with my MEAC game of the week. Undefeated North Carolina A&T welcomes in the North Carolina Central Eagles to Aggie Stadium in what looks to be an interesting in-state matchup. Can the Eagles upset the Aggies and ruin their perfect season? We'll find out on Saturday. Howard, looking to extend their winning streak to 6 games, travels to Hampton, Virginia, and will take on the Pirates. The Bison have climbed all the way up to 2nd place in the MEAC, while the Pirates sit at 5-5 and in the middle of the conference standings. 6-3 Bethune-Cookman plays host to 3-win Florida A&M in another Week 12 in-state rivalry. South Carolina State, who will try and win 2 in a row for the first time this season, plays Savannah State at T.A. Wright Stadium. Delaware State plays Florida State in an out-of-conference game. I'm Arthur Schneiderman for FCS Conference Whiparound.
After an exciting Week 11 that saw North Dakota State win a share of the conference title and South Dakota State keep their conference title hopes alive with a thrilling overtime victory, let's take a look at the stats FCS conference standings with 1 week to go. North Dakota State is on top at 6-1, followed by South Dakota State and Northern Iowa at 5-2, then South Dakota, Western Illinois, and Illinois State at 4-3. Youngstown State at 3-4, Southern Illinois and Missouri State at 2-5, and finally Indiana State at 0-7. Number 24, Northern Iowa looks to wrap off a playoff spot with a win against Indiana State. Number 9, Western Illinois looks to get a first-round bye in this year's playoffs with a win against Southern Illinois. Number 21, Illinois State can lock up a playoff spot with a win against number 4, North Dakota State, who can clinch sole possession of the conference title with a win. And finally, what better way to end the Missouri Valley Football Conference regular season than with the South Dakota Showdown, as number 15 South Dakota hosts number 6 South Dakota State as the 2 best quarterbacks in the conference square off. Jackrabbits quarterback Tyron Christian and Yotes quarterback Chris Strevler have combined for a whopping 46 passing touchdowns and 17 rushing touchdowns. This will be a high-scoring game, and the key to victory will be which team's defense can contain the other's high-powered offense. Whatever the game's outcome, just make sure you take the over. For the Missouri Valley Football Conference on Football Gameplan's FCS Whiparound, I'm Brian Sullivan.
In one of the most exciting back-and-forth games of not only the NEC, but the entire FCS season, Central Connecticut State booked its first trip to the FCS playoffs by defeating Duquesne, thanks in large part to quarterback Jake Dolegala and some miscues in the Duquesne kicking game. Central Connecticut jumped out on the Dukes, taking a 14-0 lead in the second quarter and lining up for a 37-yard field goal. However, the Blue Devils took a shot and faked it, but Jake Dolegala barely overthrew brother Jarrett, and Duquesne took over and marched right down the field for a score right before halftime. Then in the second half, the Dukes took over, both offensively and defensively, building a 27-14 lead behind 2 sack fumbles by the defense and the 3-headed attack of Tommy Stewart, Nahari Crawford, and A.J. Hines on offense. However, the Dukes missed what would turn out to be a crucial extra point after the 3rd touchdown. Central Connecticut, after a very sluggish start to the second half, would come roaring back with under 6 minutes to play in the game, putting together 2 scoring drives and taking the lead 28-27 with 2 minutes to play. The three-headed Duquesne offensive attack would move the ball all the way down the field, and a pass interference call in the end zone would set up an 18-yard field goal attempt with 6 seconds left for the win. But kicker John Dolmit could not manage the tough angle, and it sailed left, making Central Connecticut State NEC champions 1 year after a 2-9 campaign. Hats off to Coach Rosamondo and his staff. Quarterback Jake Dolagala finished the day 21 of 33 for 276 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air, and rushed for an additional 23 yards and 2 touchdowns, earning himself my NEC Offensive Player of the Week award. In other action around the league, Bryant outlasted Robert Morris 42-17 in Moon Township Saturday. And though they gave up 42 points, the star of the day was Robert Morris defensive back Heaven Price, who had one of the best defensive quarters on record. In the second quarter alone, he recovered a fumble, had 2 interceptions, and throughout the game came away with 9 tackles, all solo, and another forced fumble, earning himself my NEC Defensive Player of the Week award. Sacred Heart defeated St. Francis 16-7 in the other conference matchup last weekend, and Wagner, though they were even in total yards with number 12 Stony Brook, could not overcome 3 turnovers and lost 38-10. But I didn't want to overlook the effort of Cameron Gill, who had 4 sacks for the Seahawks. As we take a look at the standings, we can see that Central Connecticut locked up the top spot, followed by Duquesne, who could get in the playoffs through an at-large bid, but with 2 straight losses, it's not looking good. They'll have one more showcase against Bryant this weekend. For the FCS Conference Whiparound, I'm Luke Jackson.
As we wrap up the regular season this week, it's time to start crowning champions. And for a second consecutive year, the Pioneer League Championship goes to the Toreros of San Diego. And they did it in style. Anthony Lawrence earned Offensive Player of the Week honors, going 24 for 48 for 403 yards and 3 scores, as San Diego set a school record for yards, racking up 706 in their 63-7 win over Davidson. In other scores around the league, Drake beat the brakes off of Campbell 45-10, with wide receiver Steven Duran making 4 catches for 170 yards and 2 scores. Jacksonville held off Stetson 13-10. Marist beat Morehead State in a close game 38-31, and Valparaiso defeated Butler in their annual rivalry game 36-28, earning the Hoosier Helmet Trophy. A look at the standings going into the final week. San Diego, a week after earning their 2nd consecutive conference title, will look to make it back-to-back undefeated conference seasons. Meanwhile, Jacksonville will try to keep its slim playoff hopes alive with an 8th win this week. 4 games on the schedule this week in the final weekend of the regular season. Davidson travels to take on the Eagles of Morehead State. Valparaiso will host Dayton 1 week after their rivalry victory. And San Diego will look to keep their momentum rolling into the postseason as they host Marist. But this week's featured game will be in Indiana when the Bulldogs of Drake host Jacksonville. The Dolphins hope to make the playoffs, but are slim to say the least. But earning an 8th win against the Bulldogs could give them a glimmer of hope for an NCAA at-large bid. For the FCS Conference Whiparound, I'm David Hassagen.
Let's take a look at last weekend's games in the Patriot League. We had 2 shutouts out of the 3 games, so the defense has really held the torch this week. Bucknell beat Georgetown 12-0 on 4 field goals. Colgate took down Lafayette on the road 27-0, and Lehigh beat Holy Cross at home 34-21. Dom Bragalone rushed for 201 yards in the win. Let's take a look at the current standings around the Patriot League. Colgate and Lehigh are tied in first at 4-1, and only those 2 teams have a shot at this year's title. Behind them is Lafayette at 3-2 and Holy Cross at 3-3. Fordham and Bucknell are tied for 5th at 2-3, and Georgetown is in last at 0-5. The title is on the line coming into the final week of the Patriot League season. Bucknell travels to Fordham at noon. Bucknell comes into the season finale on fire after a big shutout victory over Georgetown last weekend on Senior Day. Fordham, on the other hand, will be playing their final game of a disappointing 2017 season that began with title aspirations and ended with their 2 best players getting hurt. Running back Chase Edmonds was able to come back from injury and break the all-time Patriot League rushing record, as well as the Patriot League all-purpose yards record, but this season will be thought of as what could have been for the Rams. They'll be looking to end the season on a good foot by winning the season finale at home in front of a packed Jack Coffey Stadium, and I expect them to do that. Lehigh hosts Lafayette at 12:30 p.m. at Goodman Stadium. This is the 153rd meeting between the two sides in what is college football's most played rivalry in history. If Lehigh comes up with their third straight win over the Leopards, it would clinch the Hawks their second straight Patriot League title and their 12th overall. But more importantly, they would qualify for the FCS playoffs for the second straight year as they continue their quest for the FCS National Championship. Since the 100th meeting between the squads in 1964, Lehigh has had the upper hand with 33 wins in 52 games, including 7 of the last 9, and I think they'll handle business in the most important game of the season, especially since they have the home field advantage. Media members have voted on the game's MVP every year since 1960, and Hawks quarterback Brad Mays is my guess at winning this season. In the final game of the week, Colgate visits Georgetown at 1 p.m., needing some help from Lafayette. You can watch this game live and in HD on the Patriot League Network. If Lafayette beats Lehigh and the Raiders can handle their business against the last-place Hoyas, they will clinch the Patriot League and the automatic FCS playoff berth. Last week, the Raiders had 2 defensive backs share Patriot League Defensive Player of the Week honors after their 27-0 thrashing of Lafayette. Senior All-American Pat Afriyi reached 26.5 sacks in his career, which only leaves him 2 behind the all-time program record. With the season on the line, I expect him to come up big this week and reach that huge milestone. I think Colgate will win this game, but with a Lehigh win, it won't be enough for the Raiders, who will finish runners-up. With the FCS Conference Whiparound, I'm Chris Fictel.
For the 4th straight year, it will be Jacksonville State representing the Ohio Valley Conference in the FCS playoffs. But they shouldn't be the only ones this year. We'll get to that in a second. But first, congratulations to Coach John Gross and his staff on a hard-fought 14-7 victory over the upset-minded Skyhawks of UT Martin, giving the Gamecocks their 4th straight OVC title, 31 straight OVC victories, and, if they defeat Tennessee State on Thursday night, a top 3 seed in the FCS playoff bracket. Quickly in other OVC action, Tennessee State defeated Southeast Missouri 23-20, and Murray State, led by wide receiver Jordan Gandy's 160 yards and 2 touchdowns, beat Tennessee Tech 31-21. With that effort, Jordan earned himself my OVC Offensive Player of the Week. Eastern Kentucky jumped out to a lead on the Austin Peay Governors Saturday, and in a microcosm of how they've been this entire season, the Governors rolled off 24 straight points to win the game 31-24 on an 8-yard rush by quarterback Jeremiah Oatsball with 55 seconds left. Now the win gives the Governors an overall 7-4 record, 6-1 in the OVC, with their only FCS loss this season coming at the hands of the Stats' number 2 team, Jacksonville State. Now stay with me a minute while I tell you about the Governors' season and why it should not end Saturday against Eastern Illinois. Last year, Austin Peay was 0-11 and entered this season picked dead last in the always competitive Ohio Valley Conference, riding a 27-game losing streak. This year has been a total turnaround for the Governors, as they have just 1 loss in FCS competition to the aforementioned number 2 ranked Jacksonville State. They've played 3 FBS opponents, and while they lost all 3 games, they played Cincinnati to within a touchdown, held Miami of Ohio under 300 yards of offense, and put up 33 points on Central Florida, the number 16 ranked FBS team in the country. The Govs are as balanced a team as you will find in the nation, with yards and points per game in the top half of both offensive and defensive categories, something that no other borderline at-large playoff candidate can say. And for that matter, the teams they may be competing against this Sunday for an at-large bid, like Eastern Washington, Delaware, Northern Iowa, Howard, or Jacksonville, have all had the opportunity to give themselves a better resume by winning against conference opponents, yet haven't really taken advantage. Now, Austin Peay has beaten every other conference opponent it has played, save for JSU. Every other team I've mentioned has at least 2, if not more, FCS level losses. And the Ohio Valley Conference has had playoff success both in the distant past and recent past, as it had champions in the 80s with Eastern Kentucky, has placed 2 teams in the tournament 5 of the last 7 years, and had 3 teams in the tournament 2013, and a finalist 1 year later when Jacksonville State lost to North Dakota State. And on top of all that, the Austin Peay fans packed the seats. Watch how full Forterra Stadium, which is supposed to hold only 8,000, but has posted attendance figures of 8,812 against UT Martin, 9,428 against Southeast Missouri, and will again touch that number Sunday as the fans come to see what they will hope will be a playoff-bound Austin Peay team play Eastern Illinois. In short, Austin Peay puts a good product on the field and fans in the stands to watch it. The perfect combination for an at-large FCS bid. For the Conference Whiparound, I'm Luke Jackson.
Week 11 in the Southern Conference turned out to be chock full of high-scoring games. Wofford uses the ground game to blow out the Virginia Military Institute Keydets 45-14. Andre Studdard ran for 2 of Wofford's 6 rushing touchdowns as the Terriers earned their 9th win of the season, while the Keydets are still winless. Furman extends their winning streak to 7 games, beating the Citadel Bulldogs 56-20. The Paladins scored touchdowns on each of their first 7 possessions as they cruise for their 6th conference victory. T. Mitchell had 120 yards on 26 carries and 1 score as the Mercer Bears defeat Western Carolina 35-33 in a tightly contested affair. Tyree Adams passed for 378 and 3 TDs for the Catamounts, but it was not enough as the Bears win their 5th game of the season. Devlin Hodges throws for 261 yards and 4 TDs as the Sanford Bulldogs blow out East Tennessee State 42-7. Let's go to the standings. 7th-ranked Rockford is at the top with 7-1 conference record. They are followed by 20th-ranked Furman, who have 6 conference wins. Sanford, ranked 17th, is right behind them with 5 conference wins and 7 wins overall. Western Carolina, Mercer, and Citadel are in the middle of the pack. East Tennessee, Chattanooga, and Virginia Military round out the conference. Let's look ahead to Week 12 as we have huge in-conference games as well as some teams traveling out of conference to play some of the best teams in the country. 20th-ranked Furman travels to Birmingham, Alabama to play 17th-ranked Sanford in an in-conference matchup that could possibly be a playing game. The Mercer Bears will have their hands full when they travel to Tuscaloosa and take on the Alabama Crimson Tide. The Citadel Keydets go on the road to Clemson, South Carolina, and will try for the upset against the Tigers. 7th-ranked Rockford takes their 9-1 overall record to Columbia, South Carolina, and will square off against the Gamecocks. And in an in-state matchup, Western Carolina goes into Chapel Hill and takes on the Tar Heels. Chattanooga plays host to East Tennessee State. Both teams have 2 conference victories. I'm Arthur Schneiderman for FCS Conference Whiparound.
Week 11 is in the books as a lot of offenses showed up. We will recap those games along with looking forward to Week 12 as the playoffs are right around the corner. Jeremiah Briscoe was at it again as he threw for 350 yards and 5 touchdowns as the Bearcats defeated the Wildcats 44-35. Central Arkansas continues to show us why they are the best team in the Southland as they won their game over the Cardinals 56-10. Lamar won their game over Houston Baptist 23-16. Lamar outscored them 21-3 after the first quarter. The Colonels defeated the Lumberjacks 34-13, and the Cowboys relied more on their offense this week as they put up 44 points in a win over the Demons. We look at the FCS stats standings as the Bears remain at the top while the Bearcats and Colonels sit right behind them. With 2 weeks remaining, it looks like a 3-team race. So let's get to next week as we have 2 Thursday night teams as the Panthers take on the Cardinals, while the Colonels take on the Lions. Moving on to Saturday where we have 2 4 p.m. games as the Bears look to continue their great season as they go up against the Wildcats. The Lumberjacks take on the Demons, and the night game we have the Cowboys matching up against the Cardinals. But the game I'm looking at is the Bearcats and the Huskies. And I know it's a 9-1 team going up against a 1-9 team, but I'm really liking the play of quarterback Jeremiah Briscoe. Despite throwing 20 less touchdown passes from a year ago, he is still completing 55% of his passes. For the FCS Whiparound, I'm Doug Saravo.
Week 11 in the SWAC featured a full slate of conference games. Jackson State beat Alabama A&M in a low-scoring affair 10-7. Grambling State took down Alabama State 24-7. Southern U beat Texas Southern 33-7 behind Herbert Edwards' 159 yards and 1 touchdown. Prairie View A&M was victorious over Arkansas Pine Bluff 35-12. Cordero Hodge had a whopping 232 yards to go with 3 touchdowns on the ground in that one. Alcorn State pitched a shutout against Mississippi Valley State 59-0. Orlando Vios had 253 yards and 3 touchdowns in the game. Now to the standings. In the East, Alcorn State sits atop the conference at 5-1 in conference play. Alabama State sits at second with a 3-3 record in conference play. Alabama A&M, Jackson State, and Mississippi Valley State round out the SWAC East standings. Over to the West, Grambling State is still in first with a perfect 6-0 record in conference play. In second is Southern U with a 5-1 record in conference play. Prairie View A&M, Texas Southern, and Arkansas Pine Bluff round out the bottom of the SWAC West. Week 12 in the SWAC features 3 conference games and 2 out-of-conference games. Starting on Thursday night, Prairie View A&M goes on the road to play Incarnate Word. Alabama A&M goes up against Kentucky State. East Conference leading Alcorn State faces off against Jackson State. Alabama State is up against Mississippi Valley State, and the final game of the week for the SWAC is Texas Southern against Arkansas Pine Bluff. Grambling State is on a bye this week. For FCS Conference Whip Around, I'm Max Bazzone.